Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the International Trade Forum. Perhaps before we start, we could just ask the panel to introduce themselves. Jessie, maybe you could start.
Yes, I can. So, hey everyone, fantastic to be here. My name is Jessie Frank. I'm based in London. I am the founder of a boutique consultancy called Planet 1.5. We usually say we are saving the planet one business at a time. And we do that by going in and installing sustainability at the heart of organizations. So evaluating value chains, operations, and we say when you earn the right to talk about it, we can amplify that towards your client portfolio, your stakeholders, etc.
Thank you, Jessie. Hayden.
I am Hayden Green. I'm speaking from South Africa. I'm a farmer and also a sustainability and ESG consultant. So our aim is to enable business leaders manage their business better from a sustainable perspective. And so I've got the same outlook with Jessie, but just from a different continent.
Thank you, Hayden. Sam.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Sam Holliday. I'm speaking from Gloucester in England. And I'm the representative of the Federation of Small Businesses, also known as the FSB, which for those who may not know is Britain's biggest business representation group. And we cover businesses of all sectors, from all SME sizes, many of whom export, many of whom don't. So it's obviously very important to us to keep an eye on what's happening with the export market and to try and encourage our members where we can to look beyond the British shores to sell their goods and services. Sam Holliday, FSB.
Thank you, Sam. John.
Hi, everybody. Really glad to be here. I'm John Harris. I'm the International Education and Business Development Lead for the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. We're a federated organisation, so that means that across the world we've got over 40 branches of CILT. We're a membership organisation, so individuals will be chartered or other grades of member within our organisation. That's very much about developing them as transport and logistics professionals, but we also have corporate members. The way we express ourselves in countries is slightly different, obviously according to culture and according to what the local needs are. But essentially, our main manifesto is that we're here to educate, to train, to develop professionals to be the absolute best they can be within the supply chain and transport sector, and of course to encourage younger people, underrepresented groups, women to enter this as a chosen career.
Thank you, John. Mark.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Mark Dodsworth. I'm co-founder and managing director of Euro Partnerships Limited. We're a business established in 2000 and with offices in the West Midlands, although I'm speaking to you from Bristol today. We provide a range of services for primarily SMEs in the area of internationalization. So that can range from market research through to identification, selection and appointment of sales partners, through to developing export marketing strategies for new markets and everything in between. So looking forward very much to this discussion.
Thank you, Mark. Richard.
Hello, everyone. Richard Baines, also speaking from Gloucestershire. I'm a retired academic, but have been involved in consultancy in the UK and internationally over the last 20 plus years. My particular interest is how we can connect farmers to sustainable supply chains, looking at both international supply chains as well as local ones. And more recently, I've just taken on and become a director of a local business-to-business food cooperative here in Gloucestershire called Cotswold, or Gloucestershire and surrounds, called Cotswold Taste. And we're trying to just rebuild that facility. Part of what we're doing is linking to Food from England, and that's giving us a conduit into talking and asking questions and selling ideas to government on the one hand, and supporting our members to better understand their opportunities. So today's really helpful because I think increasingly our members are looking at alternatives to the local market as well, including export. So I hope we can get some good information to feed back to them. And maybe one or two of them are listening as we circulate it to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Right, my name is Roger McCrill. I have two hats. I run a small company exporting pig meat to China, Singapore and India. Our main business is Sabre UK Limited, which I'm the founder, founded in 2007, located here in the Cotswolds. And we facilitate companies moving and working towards moving into India and China, particularly, as well as the US. We offer market research, and basically we hold their hand actually entering into the market and sustaining their business in the market. So welcome everybody. Just to start with, the COVID-19 pandemic has severely disrupted international trade, reshaping the pattern of globalization and creating challenges for businesses and SMEs in particular. The export landscape has changed and possibly created additional barriers to trade. The performance of the country's logistics and transport system is central to international trade and the smooth functioning of global supply chains. Various aspects contribute to logistics performance at a country level, including the quality of trade and the transport infrastructure, the efficiency of customs, and the level of technology adoption. In turn, these factors can influence the economic outcome of the region, in our case, Gloucestershire or the country. So against that background of the pandemic, we've seen a particular disruption in the global supply chains with the COVID-19 pandemic. How does the panel see the changing shape of the global supply chains and the international trade for the future, considering the need for resilience and agility, as well as the climate change considerations of net zero and sustainability? Perhaps, John, you might want to start with this one.
Yeah, thanks very much, Roger. I mean, I think there's two angles that we can take on this. There's the very practical issue that we've seen in terms of impact. So different countries would have responded to the pandemic in different ways, but there are some global trends, and this include things like driver shortages, delays at borders and customs, certain things that have actually kind of happened right across the world in whichever cultural context you sit. So some of those countries have responded very quickly and very effectively to try and say, well, how do we turn this round? How do we use digital techniques to try and sort stuff out? How can we improve lines of communication? Do we need to do things differently? So at a very practical level, moving your goods or your product from A to B, that has certainly suffered. There's another angle, though, that I'd like to put, that it's actually made a lot of organizations change the way they think. And the SME market, and Sam may want to pick up on this, not saying that corporates and larger machines, can't be lean, can't be agile, can't be effective. From my own background, I saw, transformative things within the rail passenger sector. I know we're not talking about that specifically this morning, but the way railways had to respond overnight to COVID with driver shortages, social distancing, some quite big beasts managed to accommodate. But I'd like to put it to you that probably it's those micro and smaller businesses that can really be quite transformative under a time of pressure. And I'll give you an example. Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport has been operating in Kazakhstan for the last 4 years. To give you an idea of the scale of journey they went on, 4 years ago, they expressed interest in opening a training center in Almaty for logistics qualifications. 4 years later, they've managed to achieve over $500,000 worth of USA funding. They have a head office serving the whole of Central Asia of about 6 or 7 staff. And they are a trusted partner with world donor organizations. And the project that we've just completed has been a BSP, Business Support Program, helping small, medium enterprises with supply chain problems. So they're either supply chain is their business, or actually they're heavily reliant on supply chain working, but they don't have expertise within their organization, and they needed help. So by providing business coaches and training professionals in technical areas to become really good technical mentors and business advisors to them, we're able to help 75 organizations. And as a result of that, we've now got funding to carry that on this financial year. So I think really the power of this is around changing the way we think, the way we do business, and really helping the SMEs be able to make that change.
Thank you, John. Sam, perhaps you'd like to sort of give a view from the SME's point of view about the supply chain and its resilience and agility that they offer, and the problems, of course, of net zero and sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in this, isn't there? And John's example is a brilliant one, but I think it's been one of the best things that we've seen, if that's the right way of putting it, throughout COVID, about how adaptable small businesses can be. But that's not through choice. Many of them have had to. Many have had to look at every aspect of their business and really start thinking again. And maybe John's right, because they're smaller and they control their own destiny a little bit more, they've been able to do it. So yes, there are some positives there, and there are some other positives coming out of the small business community as well at the moment. Just as an example, we launched our Southwest Small Business Awards last year, and we were a little bit tentative whether anybody would even enter, because it's been such a tough year. We've had a record amount of entries, and having seen many of them, a lot of businesses have done extremely well. They've kept fairly quiet about it because it's almost what I'd call survivor's guilt, because they know so many of their colleagues have struggled, but a lot of businesses have done well. So there are some signs that it is good, but I don't think we should underestimate where we still are. I mean, I think for export, we've been talking about this for a little while. It was like this triple whammy, if you like, over the last couple of years. It was obviously COVID, which affected everything. Brexit, I'll be the first one to mention it this morning, obviously affected not only trade with Europe, but confidence with export generally. And then we've had all these delays at the ports and that, which aren't always connected to things like COVID either. So it has made working internationally seem very difficult. And I'm going to put a challenging question that maybe Jesse might want to pick up on. Is net zero and sustainability, which is something that we passionately believe in and we're pushing a lot, could that actually be a deterrent to export? Could people think, I really want to stick to buying very, very local to avoid the transport issues and so forth? So there's so much for small businesses to consider. John is right, they can be free to foot, they can be able to move very quickly, but they've also got enormous pressures at the moment with costs, not being able to get the staff, and all those other factors. So I'm seeing some glimmers of hope, and hopefully that will be reflected in export, but we're not there yet, but maybe we're starting to turn a bit of a corner. So yeah, there are some positives, but still not there yet.
Well, Jesse, you were posed a question. What's your view?
Well, I'll jump right into it. I think there's something to it. I think this entire pandemic has really created an appreciation of the things we have. And we live in a community, and where before we were these world people and it was all about, it was cool to travel and we were so busy being busy, where taking a step back and looking at what it is that really matters in life, I think we're then appreciating the local little corner shop now even more than we ever done. So as a small SME, making that an advantage and really being that local hero and cherishing that environment, I think can be a strength. It's like people have gotten closer to nature. I always say that to my clients. So make that a thing. And then I think there's another point, which I think a lot about, is if we see businesses and the way we've been living as if we were on a timeline, it's like we've just been in this jar of things that happened. But with COVID, it was as if there were a reboot and everybody just had to leap 10 years ahead, because I think we were already on the trajectory of working more online and some of the technologies were there, but it was a great opportunity for us all to take that leap. Because imagine if, so I'm in the UK, I wouldn't be able to just demand that my clients and my customers were working online if that was not the norm. But now that it's become the norm, it's something, it's a new redefined playing field that we can all chip into in order to try and make things better. And for me, better is make it more sustainable.
Thanks, Josie. Mark, obviously you deal with international businesses and the supply chains. What have you seen in terms of the disruption in the supply chains and how it's affected SMEs?
No, it's been dramatic, and I've got a lot to add to what Jesse, Sam, and John have said. But obviously, it's been dramatic. It's been affecting the smaller companies particularly very seriously. We work with exporters selling into the UK primarily, but obviously I've also got knowledge of Brits going out. I think we have seen, for example, one indication of how SMEs are trying to deal with this is a greater demand for warehousing and distribution centers in the target market. So in trying to cut down on the reliance on freight and transport, and to set up their stock, establish their stock in the target market. We've seen that particularly in Holland for British companies, and Nordic companies that I work with coming into the UK have been increasingly asking us to help them find warehousing, as well as the usual sales partners and market opportunities. Another interesting phenomenon is the emergence of innovative service providers. I've talked to John about this, actually, about a very interesting example from Finland, a freight management company, a freight forwarder really, called Normilan Logistics, who have developed a rail link between Europe and Asia, which means that they can cut out a lot of the uncertainty that has been affecting the world in the last couple of years, providing a reliable, dependable rail link, not only for sourcing goods in Asia and particularly China, but also for supplying the ASEAN markets. And this has been really interesting, and I think companies like Normilan have a great future in the way they've developed that rail link to between Europe and Asia.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, I mentioned yesterday I'm using the rail link next time, exporting to China. Hayden, how have you seen the supply chain affecting you following the COVID situation, and what's changed?
So primarily I work in the resources space and agricultural space. The supply chain issues were companies' major number one risks, but during the second half of the pandemic, those went down the risk register. What's happening is the prices of imported commodities equipment and chemicals that needed in the various industries, the prices have shot through the roof. And that is a serious business constraint, and I think that's not only an issue here in the Deep South, but it could be worldwide. That's just that'll clear up with supply chain returning to normal. But now I think we need to start focusing on what are the big issues that now that COVID's taking a back seat with the vaccines and with herd immunity, is we need to look at the climate change agenda, and then also the sustainability and integrity agenda for products. So one which is coming on later is making sure that there's standardized standards for all products across the world, and getting to means of seeing that information, having it readily available for investors and from ESG perspective, and also from sustainability from your client's perspective or potential suppliers. The other one is the elephant in the room, which is the carbon border tax. It has been discussed in the UK recently, and it's going to be very, very big. But there are a lot of opportunities that are coming out of two sectors as well.
Oh, thanks, Hayden. Richard, obviously you've got members and knowledge within the supply chain. What's been your experience of the supply chain changes that have occurred?
Yeah, I think like Hayden, I very much operate within the agri-food space. I think there's three observations and then maybe a suggestion coming out of that I'd like to just share with you. The first one was that we all recognise that within the agri-food industry, the dominance of the multiple retailers in terms of their share of the market and the way in which they control supply chains. And I think those are the ones who really fell foul of COVID in the early stages, because they'd gone into a just-in-time delivery and only having bespoke suppliers, and those bespoke suppliers having bespoke suppliers as well. And then as soon as one thing went wrong, they had problems, and we saw that on the shelves. My second observation was the way in which smaller food businesses adapted to the situation. One example was one of the members of Cotswold Taste supplies food into Gloucestershire services on the M5, and of course with the lockdown and everything, overnight that business completely it went from a significant sort of four-figure sum into nothing, and their reaction to that was to get online and to start to promote through that. And within 2 months they'd recouped their whole market, and were selling equivalent amount of products online, and basically using the internet as their shop window for whoever wanted it. Then they had the sort of not unenviable, but the problem that when the Gloucestershire services started to open up, how do they service both of those, and how do they adjust to it? So I think they showed their agility in that. I think the third observation was I saw a number of cases where shops within an area actually got together to order and promote and to sell and to deliver. So they learnt some of the skills of the shop and collect, click and collect, or shop and deliver online from the big multiples, and they developed their own local system of that, and it worked. I guess my question is, how do you go from that local system that's using some of the really good technology that's worked for the big supply chains, how do you scale that up to the next level? And I think we need to be looking at maybe existing businesses or new businesses that act as aggregators for local food providers and local products providers, and actually acts as that link, part of the and feeds into that logistics chain, which I think John's obviously explained significantly about in previous meetings. So I do think there's almost a new role that's wanted, which is it's like the integrator of the multiple retailers, but it's at a more local and working with SMEs more. But those SMEs have got to then meet the safety, quality, and time issues and quantity issues for it to work.
Thank you, Richard. And Sam, have you seen your members sort of and the SMEs sort of getting together in terms of aggregating their ability to export at all? Or?
No, I think I haven't seen that myself, but I said that's a very good example. But it does kind of show the adaptability I'm talking about, and I think that one about the Gloucester services is a really good example, because at the FSB we do kind of fairly regular networking, and there'll be times when people get to introduce what they do. And I remember at the start of networking, one particular lady I know was introducing her business, and I thought that's good. A few months later, she introduced a totally different business, same person, different business. She basically looked at what she'd got and completely changed it. And I think what Richard said was absolutely right. A lot of retailers did that as well, that they thought, my shop's about to close. I know a retailer that sells candles. The candle shop is about to close down. What on earth am I going to do? They're candles. They're very portable. They're very photogenic. I'm going to create a very good website. And suddenly, it doesn't matter if your customer is in Cheltenham or China, as long as you've got a product that both want and they can both get. So I don't think I saw so much of the getting together which Richard did, but which I'm very pleased to hear about. But adaptability and using digital as part of that, definitely.
I think as well, just adding to that, if you do start to aggregate at the local level and then hit markets elsewhere, you can actually address some of the challenges of sustainability, because you're actually putting sufficient volume onto transport, and therefore you're not wasting transport, because we know that probably if you look at local delivery of food and what have you, it's probably about the third worst in terms of impacts on the climate, sort of after customers picking up from the supermarket and air freight. So it does mean that you can start to bulk up and get the efficiency, whether that then goes by lorry to its customers or by train or whatever. Then I think we can address the sustainability issue through it as well.
Yeah,
to an extent.
I agree with Richard. Actually, I think there is a key link here between aggregation and smart thinking and smart transport and strategic sustainability goals. But one of the key questions is who's taking the risk. So what's interesting at the moment, I mean, I know I've mentioned it on a couple of other round tables, but it's an important example. There's a key challenge that when you have exports going east to west. The amount of stuff coming from China and that part of the world far exceeds what is actually going back. And one of the challenges is around who and how you can aggregate sufficient goods in a sort of non-fuss way to enable sustainable transport to be the way to do it. So at the moment, Mark was talking about Finland. There's three things that we're trying to do at the moment as CILT as being almost a strategic thought partner. So we're trying to bring three projects together. One is operationally, can we fill empty wagons going from the UK, from Freightliner terminals and rail heads into Germany, Poland for aggregation onto bigger trains, and then move that whole lot across to China. That's issue one. Issue two is what's the likely consumer demand, because we're in this click and collect sort of thing. If a lot of products are now coming here, does that mean there's going to be even more empty wagons? Okay, the people will pay for those empty wagons to sit at Tilbury or eventually be shipped back in a boat. But actually, that's not green, that's not sustainable. That's a lot of wasted space and carbon. And then the third angle is there's a little area called Central Asia, where actually, even if they very modestly filled a couple of trains back to Europe each week, that would make quite a tremendous difference to some of their export patterns. So you've almost, don't forget China's at the end of the line, and you've got Central Asia as a sort of growing economy that wants to lock into this. So what we're trying to do is say, well, how at a local level could local logistics operators and Southwest businesses, fill a couple of railway wagons, okay? And then the macro picture is, well, how do we actually make sure that the suppliers over in the East actually think of rail and low carbon transport as their first mode? So there's a real micro macro thing going on at the moment where we're trying to bring together different funding streams, different operators, and that takes time. And one of my challenges here is, if that's all too difficult for an SME, won't they be tempted just to go for the no or low green option rather than the carbon one? That's really a question over to Jesse, because clearly bulk movement by rail is more efficient than boat and is certainly more efficient than air. But actually, unless there's those integrators that have got the time or the funding to bother to do it, how are we going to get that step change?
Jesse, do you want to comment on that at all? Or?
I will do. I just need to make sure I got the question right.
I'll just make a quick observation before Jesse jumps in. I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel, because if we actually go back to the old Silk Road, it actually wasn't one supply chain. It was a series of integrated cascades going along in different supply chains. So this idea could be sort of re-looked at again. But secondly, again, I'm coming from the point of view of food, where we got time limits and perishables. It's whether freight movement can actually be adapted to be able to carry perishables and food grade stuff at the same time as other products, which maybe can sit in a warehouse longer while you build up a full load. So it's almost like saying the food's got to move on time, but then you fill the rest of the crates, the train, whatever, with other products that can be aggregated without a time limit, as tight a time limit. And that would then, I think, Jesse, help a little bit with the sustainability argument in that sense as well.
Yeah, it will do. I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with the head of one of the world's largest logistic firms. And he said, well, I don't know if you know about the concept called the rebound effect, but it's essentially when we become so good at something that we can fill the gap with more. So as we progress and we become more effective, and we might have shared transportation, and I'm aware that in this industry, keeping things cold and fresh to the end consumer is a really big thing, right? But as we are mapping out the best route from supplier to consumer, we become really good at it. And that means that normally we could have 10 trucks going from A to B, but in a year we might be able to have 15. So then it becomes a little bit of moral complex with, do we then just keep filling because the demand is actually rising, because the economy is getting better in parts of the world and people want their meat, they want their luxury goods, they want everything. So I think there's a question to be asked in this, that of course we shouldn't have empty lorries going around, but do we also just send those extra 5 on the street because we can?
That comes down to really the education and the direction that consumers are prepared to take themselves in, really, isn't it? But then what is the responsibility of the industry to provide that education? I don't know.
But, you know, taking your point, Richard, there is this Belt and Road Initiative out of Central Asia from China.
Yeah.
And again, the point on that, if you read in detail how it's being structured, it is a number of consolidators and aggregators along the route. So there is a tremendous opportunity in Central Asia, totally untapped. But
also then, if you look at the Belt Roads out of China, if you look at the book on the New Silk Road, then I think we mentioned it yesterday, Hayden, Beira Port in Mozambique. That is the key boat port for most of sort of all but West Africa, for trade between sort of China and Asia and Africa, linking to the shipping out of Beira, and then the rail link up into the middle of Africa, isn't there?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Shall we move on? I think we've got some very interesting points come out of that. Well, what's the panel's views on SMEs in this region dealing with the EU 27 markets, considering both the pandemic, Brexit, and the export landscape changes? Sam, would you like to open this one up?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this week, one of the MPs, it's local to the Southwest, Jacob Rees-Mogg, has just been appointed Minister for Brexit Opportunities. And I did see one joke, that's the first genuine job that's come out of Brexit, but that's probably unfair. But I think, I don't know really. I mean, there was obviously at the start of the year quite a lot of negative publicity again because of some of the more changes that have been coming in terms of trade. But I detected a certain dipping the toe back in maybe this year. I think people have been really waiting to see what's been happening with Brexit. And of course, COVID didn't help. I mean, none of us can really say, has Brexit been a success or a failure? Because COVID has made it impossible to judge it. But maybe as COVID becomes less of an issue, and if you listen to the Prime Minister yesterday, he's going to wipe away all restrictions in this country. But we must remember the rest of Europe is not at that same pace. But that might encourage people to start looking again to trade in Europe, because we have to remember prior to Brexit, and we're not going to go down that line, we were doing pretty well with our trade with Europe. You know, we still asked for more SMEs to do it, but people weren't very comfortable. I think a lot of step back. Coming back to what Jesse was saying and what Richard was saying about the pandemic made us look more local, deal more local, and feel very, very comfortable local. But I'm not saying we've been there and done that, but that is set. But now we may need to start looking a bit further afield. So I've got a feeling that this might be a year of progress in terms of our relationships again with Europe. And that may not sound tremendously flag waving, but I don't think I've been able to say that for 2 years. So I've got a feeling that some of the fear factor might start to disappear. But what it needs, and what it always needs, and we've all probably got a responsibility in this, is for success stories to be highlighted. Because trust me, negative ones are. Negative ones, you only have to get one business who gets caught up in Brexit red tape or does something, it'll be on the news and it will put off 5 other businesses. We need some success stories, and we need, and that's not just from the government, because people might think the government has got an agenda. None of us here have got an agenda. So we've all got a responsibility when we hear good news stories about trading with Europe again to broadcast that, because I suspect people will be willing to dip their toe in again now that COVID's calming down. So that's where I see it.
Well, that's good news. What about from your point of view? Where are we, Richard?
I'm not certain how SMEs are going to respond to this. I haven't got any sort of specific evidence. My gut feeling is that those who have had successful markets and contacts in Europe will continue to have conversations and find ways of achieving those problems. I think my thought would be that you should look at Europe as being only one opportunity for a global market, and you ought to be looking at any others that you can find. And I guess the mischief in me says, where could you export that allows you to get into Europe via the back door?
Well, and I think that raises the issue with Mark that was raised yesterday. Mark, any your views on that?
I wanted just to sort of turn it on its head and say, well, because as I explained, I work primarily with European SMEs coming into the UK and the Irish Republic, and what's really noticeable is the upsurge in interest that there has been since the end of last year. And the examples of that are no less than 5 trade missions which have been approved with us since December from Germany and Finland. So we've got food technology, we've got e-mobility, we've got building renovation and restoration, just as examples. We've also got 3 German states, Baden-Württemberg, Lower Saxony and Saxony itself, all bringing large delegations of SMEs to the UK with the firm intention of doing business here and looking for partners and relationships. This is what's coming from Europe. And these are all good examples which SMEs from the Southwest region can follow. There are plenty of opportunities through organisations like Business West to join trade missions, to take part in trade fairs overseas. The Europeans are doing it. We need to do that too.
Are you seeing much activity? Sorry, Joseph. Are you seeing much activity, Sam, on trade missions for SMEs out of the UK?
No, to be honest, that doesn't. The size of businesses we get, sometimes they find that those things a little bit frightening, a little bit intimidating. Not so much. And that's talking at the micro level. The businesses I deal with, I'm sure there's a lot of activity going to. I'm always a little bit struck sometimes when I go to. We're going back a little while now, but I've been to a couple of DIT events about export, and it's the big businesses are making all the noise now. And we did a report last year called Ready to Launch. And I think 1 in 5 businesses still doesn't know the starting point about where they would go to get advice about export. So, we've got a bigger conversation to have, but any trade shows are good news, but they're not always on the radar of the smallest businesses. That's not normally the route they would go down.
We'll come to where we start later on. Jessie.
Yeah, so I just think it's a really good conversation, by the way, but it's this whole Brexit that were pulled over the head of many of the SMEs, and a lot of legal constraints happened, and that is where it is. But I think coming from a sustainability perspective and looking at what can people do today, I think an overlooked point very often is actually to go in and say, where am I exporting to? And look at the local market and go in on the dashboards, SDG index, places like that, and really research what's on the local market agenda when it comes to sustainability, and how can you transform that into your business advantage? Because you might be based out of the UK, like I would be, and then you adopt all of the agendas here, but when you export to another country, the agenda might be different. So if you can have that in mind and actually start playing to that, you will evidently have a business advantage that your competitors don't have. So point number 1, really go in and do the homework and look at that.
Hayden, have you got any comment? I mean, you're obviously not in the UK, but dealing with the EU, but have you got any views at all? Yes,
so we are concerned in the Southern Africa what the impact would be of the European Union farm to fork strategy, which is implemented this year. So if we're concerned about it, it's going to give you guys a distinct advantage because of your proximity and because of your compliance to those kind of standards. So that could give British product or farm agricultural product a distinct advantage, while the rest of us, we rely on exporting to the European Union, it's a clear worry on this side. So it's what's a worry risk for us is an opportunity for you.
Yeah, could well be. Could well be. John, have you got any comments at all about the Brexit and SMEs in the situation there?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, as a professional body, our kind of role is to kind of enable and try and lessen the impact on our members. So from our angle, it was kind of prevention is better than cure. So the Department for Trade actually invested in CILT running some sort of what I would call Brexit de-risking webinars. So we brought in customs and international trade experts. We brought in logistics operators that were familiar with the European context. And we ran a series of kind of Brexit Get Ready webinars, which were really well attended. And we got good feedback that it was trying to make things simple, particularly for smaller businesses where they wouldn't have had the resources to kind of keep their finger on the pulse of everything. They wouldn't have someone that was kind of an expert in all the regulations, and they just wanted it put out really, really simply for them. So I think there is a role in this agenda for using training and education and accessible training in particular to really help de-risk these situations. So kind of Brexit has kind of happened, but I think that there is a key role, and Sam may well, echo this in terms of FSB's purposes, around really trying to see the dangers, almost get a bit of a sixth sense, and try and provide the right kind of mentoring, enabling, training, and capacity building that those smaller businesses need. So for our angle, we very much focused on using the training agenda, webinars and other tools like that to really just make people feel a little bit more comfortable and for them to be able to put their own resilience plans in place.
Sam, what are you seeing as the barriers that the SMEs are facing on exporting and importing?
I think it's a lot of what's already been said. Really, I mean, obviously the old phrase "red tape." It's the curse of SMEs, whether you're dealing with the company next door or the company abroad. But it just feels like it's multiplied when you sort of want to go abroad, and I think that is a barrier. But I think it's the same barrier that's affecting trade in this country. I think there has been a lack of confidence in trade generally. Businesses are a little bit uncertain about their clients and their supply chain. So I don't think there's anything unique about trading abroad. I quite like what Jesse said, really, that you really look at your product and who wants it and then decide how you go to them. So, for example, I don't know if you've got, the Americans are very interested in certain aspects of the royal family and stuff. So if you produce stuff to do with that, well, you look there. So I think if you do it that way round, if you just say to a business, look, you've got a product which I think would be of interest in this country or that country, and then work it round, as opposed to just think, no exporter, no business ever starts up saying, right, this morning I'm going to export. They look at their product and they think, I think somebody somewhere else in the world might like this. And that's really, if you like, is a barrier, is how do you get from that to where we want to see them doing? And that's where the support is so key. And all the research we've done has said that despite the best efforts of all of us, I guess, people aren't always sure where that first step is. But let's not pretend that Brexit hasn't been a factor in this, because I think I've said before to you, Roger, that you may think, well, why would Brexit stop people trading in China? It doesn't. It's just that the whole concept of international trade just looks far too complicated. If you can't trade in France, what chance have I got of trading in Hong Kong? So I think Brexit has affected all-round belief in confidence. So my hope is that once we start to deal with our nearest and dearest, people might be more confident to trade further afield.
It is very much up to training, though, isn't it? Coming back to John's point, taking out or de-risking the situation by training people and creating an understanding of what the process is. From your point of view, Mark, I mean, have you seen a lot of opportunity to train people, or are there training courses available? in documentation?
I just wrote down that word, demystifying, the one that you used, and I was thinking exactly the same thing. Really, our mission, a mission of a lot of people on this panel, is to try to demystify the whole process of international trade and export. And yes, there are certainly things happening. We have been, just as an example, it's not local, but we've been asked by Perthshire Chamber of Commerce to deliver a 2-day workshop up there later in the spring on, for example, search, selection and management of overseas sales partners. And I have a feeling that Perthshire are going to be bringing in advisors from some of the other Scottish chambers that might be rolled out into other parts of Scotland. So that's a good sign. They're recognizing the need for training. They're looking for training support. There are plenty of export trainers in the Southwest, and the best place to go to identify them is, again, the International Trade Advisor for the Southwest. There are several of them, but the one I would recommend is Hilary Sharman, based at Business West in Bristol.
Okay. What about from your point of view, Richard, and the education and training to support the agricultural side of the situation?
I'm not seeing the request for training from an agricultural perspective, or seeing that sort of area coming about. But I am just getting involved with India, that's trying to look at export to Europe and the UK, and we're involved in doing a gap analysis and then recommending some training to bring them up to pace to understand what's happening coming into the country. So I guess people, we said earlier, people are looking at getting into Europe. Getting into Britain from Europe, and I think people beyond that are trying to get into it. But we're not. I don't think we're seeing it from from this way looking out as much with SMEs. I guess it comes down to the fact that they got so many other things to do and so many other sort of concerns, and it comes back to my earlier suggestion that we need really these aggregators, and maybe it's those that need to get themselves up to pace with the opportunities and the documentation there is, and provide that service to those who are going to be supplying through them. So that way you're condensing the need for training and capacity building into the key aggregators rather than trying to do it for everyone.
Yeah, you're doing quite a lot of training, aren't you, Sam, through your academies? Is that focused on helping people to understand how to export?
Yeah, we've tied up with the DIT to do a couple of their export academies, and we've just finished one yesterday. Actually, we run over 4 consecutive Wednesday mornings. Only small groups. We've got about 10 people on it, but yeah, very good. I mean, they're pitched really at those that haven't yet exported at all, or those that have started to export but have hit problems, and they're good free courses, and I'd like to do more of them, to be honest, and try and get more people involved. But I have to say that you would think that was for the Southwest, by the way, and we've got like 20,000 members in the Southwest, and to only really have 10 people on a course when we flogged it to death isn't great. I mean, I would say that we didn't want more than 15, 20, but even then it wasn't easy. So I'm not sure what that says about the appetite at the moment for those courses, but they are there. So anyone that says they aren't there, they really are, and they're free, and they're very well delivered. The one was by a lady called Emily Lambert, who works for DIT out of Business West. Excellent. I mean, I learned so much, but there was people who far more educated in export than I was that also said the same. So they were obviously very good, but there's probably a step back from that as well. I mean, the phrase introduction to export, we still need those kind of courses. The demystifying word, which seems to be the word of the morning, is what a lot of people need. If only to sort of, just to sort of get them over that first hurdle, of thinking it's too much trouble, it's too much time, it's too expensive. Why bother? I'll just try and work on my own markets. Well, the reason why bother is we'll show at our awards, I mentioned earlier, some fantastic international businesses that have done exactly that. They've bothered and they're doing tremendously, and may not have done so had they not looked beyond their borders. So those are the stories we need. We need positive stories.
But does that come back to the fear that you raised? Sorry, Jesse, does that come back to the fear you raised and in actually survival mode rather than looking for moving their businesses outside the UK.
It is. It has been. I don't need to tell anybody here or anybody watching, but it's been the most horrendous 2 years for every business. So they've literally, survival has been the key. It's been one of the issues, funny enough, we talked earlier about net zero and sustainability, where we've been talking about this all the time, and some businesses saying, give us a chance. We've got to work out whether we can survive, let alone whether we can make our business more green. And I think these are the sort of things that we, but now, funnily enough, people are talking a bit more about it, feel a bit more confident. So I've got a feeling that this year, I'm starting to feel more confident for this year, looking at all the stats we're seeing. And also, I think this is important on a general sense for all of us. If any of us have had this conversation 2 years ago and said that COVID is going to last for 2 years, it's going to absolutely destroy business, it's going to destroy the economies, how many businesses do you think would still be here? None of us would say the amount there still are. So that is good. And a lot of businesses will think, do you know what? If I can survive COVID, I can survive anything. So we should say that to them if they're about export. If you can, Lima, you got through COVID, you can trade with Africa, you can trade with South Africa, you can do that. So I think that's a sort of upbeat note we want to sort of push forward, really.
Yeah. Sorry, Jesse, you had a point.
Well, I was really just nodding because I was, I like what Sam was saying, but I really agree on being better at creating good stories that we can talk about, because one, we inspire the people around us, but I think to be able to create good stories, especially when it comes to sustainability, I've actually seen a fear for a lot of companies to go out and talk about their efforts because they're so scared of being called out for greenwashing, which I completely understand, and we can't go down that route. So I think if you take Marks and Spencer's as a brilliant example, and it's what we encourage our clients to do, is to say, stop talking about, like, get things right in your background and understand where you are and acknowledge that no one is perfect. So then you go in and you really define and you write out to everybody, where are you today? And you have identified the areas that are really important to you. So that's called your materiality. So the areas that you need to work on, where you can create the most legitimate progress for your business. And then you write out and you articulate, we're here today, and in 2, 3, 5, 10 years time, the goal is to get to there, but not just. There's a lot of pledges going on at the moment with, by 2030, we're going to halve our emissions. Well, first of all, you're only playing to what is guided by the government. So it's actually not that mind-blowing. So set ambitious goals within that. And then tell the narrative around how you're going to get there more than what you intend to do, because that's not so interesting. The interesting part is the how and what you're doing to achieve this, and talk about that. And I think that's what's making a difference.
Sorry, Richard, are you
no.
putting your hand up?
Well, it's just I think no, it's just the light. It was in my eyes. A light bulb moment.
Into the screen.
A light bulb moment, but not of that type. I guess the conversation we were having yesterday, and on the food side, we've obviously seen with COVID the interest in more local and more sustainable link to that. So I think SMEs are looking at sort of two challenges. One, how do I become sustainable, and what is the local model, and how is that going to help grow my business? But at the same time, how can I also identify and exploit international markets? And I guess it's that sort of the local versus the global. Where do people sit comfortably, and can they play both games? I don't know. It depends on the interest and the skill within the SME, doesn't it?
Yeah, very true, very true. Hayden, again, looking inward, are you suffering from the same sort of thinking process over in South Africa on international trade?
I think it is. We've spoken personally about how to knowledge up to get to understand the international market better. So the good thing is that everyone's having the same problems, and we just have to get better at managing all the different standards, and then understanding what the environment is like as well. So I ditto. I agree with everyone and all the outcomes of this question. It applies down here even more.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Right. Well, we've spoken about the opportunities that we need to develop to demystify international trade. Where might the markets be for SMEs? Sort of moving one step forward. I think, Jesse, you made the point quite rightly so that, you know, people need to look at their products and see who might want it. Where is the market? So obviously that's the starting point of any consideration. Do I want to go into export, and where is the market for my product? But what markets might be available for our products out of this region? Any thoughts on that at all, Sam?
I think it's going to be different for every business, really. But I do think that maybe the one thing that the problem with Brexit might have done is it might have made people look beyond Brexit and just think for the first time. Again, in the survey that we did last year, exporters and would-be exporters said they felt far more comfortable dealing with people where they might have to understand the language better. That's a big thing for Brits, because it's the one thing that the English language in many ways is the best thing we've given to the world, but it's also been our curse because it's made us lazy about language, and it's meant that we don't really learn other languages, so we still look for other people that talk. But you'll know this better than I will, I think, Roger, from your dealings, but parts of the world aren't interested. I mean, China and Russia, particularly Russia's a big market. Russians don't learn English very much. They don't necessarily want to deal with English, but these are big markets potentially that we can't rule out. But I think that language thing is key, and I think it shouldn't be the barrier that it was because of that language that so many people want to speak it. But Australia, New Zealand, America were all pinpointed as places in our report that people want to do business with. But if we only stick to that, then we really are going to be struggling, because there's a whole wide world out there. And funny enough, Hayden, it makes me think that Africa, it's got a multitude of languages in Africa, as we know, but English is quite a common theme with a lot of them, particularly in our ex-Commonwealth countries. And I think Africa is maybe quite underexploited in terms of its export potential. We think of South Africa, we've got a lot of historic links to South Africa, but East, West, North Africa, got to be lots of opportunities there as well, hasn't there, Hayden, do you think?
There would be. The African market, we're looking internally from South Africa. We're looking internally at African markets for the very same reason. So for the other English speaking countries, or even not, if a lot of these South African big businesses are looking internally into the rest of Africa, then why aren't the UK looking at the same opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, Africa seems a significant opportunity, isn't it? But there seems very little movement in that area. Making a point for you, Sam, just to bring you up to speed, the second language in China now is English. It is now the compulsory second language from the age of 5.
Oh, well, I'll take it back then.
I think just adding to that, through my university, I think we're still involved with it. I've finished there now, obviously, but for about 15 years, we've been involved in degree programs where we actually deliver in English 4 of the modules in 2 of the years, just as a way of, again, the English language, but also learning about the sort of the Western markets and so forth. And this is with agricultural universities over there. So yes, China is an interesting one. But I'd like to pick up on Africa a little bit there. One of the things I've worked with a number of people in Africa, and I've had a large number of students who I still have a lot of contact with. A phenomenon about Africa is that it's one of the most rapidly urbanizing continents in the world. And it's going to be very much more an urbanized market, particularly in the agri-food area, which I'm obviously interested in. But the problem is that there's going to be a significant amount of poverty in those urban areas. But there's also a growing middle and upper class that want luxury goods. And the fact that they're centralized onto urban centers actually makes it easier for businesses to target those markets. And I'd say the same in India, rapidly urbanizing again, but it's got a very small proportion, a small percentage of the population that's sitting in the affluent position. Well, that's a lot of people in the Indian continent that are potential markets, and they are centralised into areas which are easier to get to than sort of being a more rural or a more diverse community. So I think there are opportunities, but I think it's opportunities for high value emotional goods. Maybe, as you were saying, Jesse, those goods with the story behind them are the ones that people are going to maybe pay that little bit more. And if you can actually put that on the website, no matter where you are in the world, and stimulate the interest, then it's just a case of getting the logistics right to do it. And it comes back to a question I asked of one of the biggest sort of food logistics sort of transporters many years ago. If I could get a bottle of Cotswold dairy cream in a bottle, and if I could guarantee for 36 hours it would maintain its temperature, where could you deliver it? And his answer was anywhere in the world, as long as someone's prepared to pay the freight costs. So I think that there is a luxury and a high value market that is out there in the continent, even those continents with high poverty levels, that are affluent people that want these things. And an SME satisfying that is going to be a big business for an SME if it's only a small part of food that's moving. So I think it's the value goods are the ones I would recommend SMEs focus on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think in my experience with our pig business, it is the premium market that you really have to attract.
Yeah.
And that is where the value is. The goods are of high value, and they differentiate themselves within the market quite readily.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jesse, you want?
Okay.
Well, it's just, I think there's so much to this territory. So there's a concept that keeps coming to mind as you guys talk, is the concept around shared value, which is really, really high on UN's agenda at the moment. So there's a brilliant case study some years back from Unilever, and obviously they have muscle power, but I can't see why this concept can't be adapted to an SME. So what they did were that there was a region, I don't quiz me on where, but there's a region in India where women couldn't get jobs, and at the same time the flow of product was really hard logistically to get to them. So they created an opportunity there by saying, okay, we need women to work so they can generate an income that benefit the local community. So we will invest in, even though we're not making a lot of profit, in getting products down to them there. That means that they will get a better economy, so that they can start getting an education around what it means to actually run a business. So then that benefits locally, and then by getting money, and they can send their kids to school, and they're then starting to build that entire community around the one thing that they're actually just making their products readily available. And by then creating that demand in a community that didn't have a lot of purchasing power, they've actually created a new market for themselves, which I think is brilliant. And that is the concept of shared value, where you bring that back into the community.
Mm.
And a good story to put on the website too.
Carry on, Mark.
Yeah, 3 or 4 points that have come to my mind as we've been talking. Firstly, repeating and re-emphasizing what Jesse and others have said about the importance of market research. So research to identify opportunities, threats, to differentiate your product or service, look at competitors, look at pricing issues, and look at whether your product or service needs to be adapted to local conditions. Really important. Secondly, on where to go, I think it's really interesting to kind of follow the FTAs, so follow the free trade agreements. And sure, we've got some that are on the other side of the world, and that presents its own problems for SMEs, but there are others that are in markets that are really quite close. And I, obviously with my British Icelandic Chamber hat on, I would definitely recommend Iceland and Norway as 2 nice little markets with high consumer spend, close by, good communication, and both of these countries now have agreements with the UK. It's some of the first European countries, because they're outside of the European Union, of course. They're actually within the EFTA group. they have been able to establish trade agreements with the UK in advance of the EU countries. So look at little markets like that. Third point I want to say is the look at markets where there may be a significant expat or British diaspora. And I just come back from 6 weeks in Canada. I was in British Columbia. It was really noticeable how the influence of the UK and of British culture is very strong in that part of Canada. I think it's also similar in Ontario, for example, to the point where you go into supermarkets in Vancouver and you'll see a British shelf. So a shelf with British products. Yeah, some of the well-known brands, but why not some of the more typically, Gloucestershire or Cotswold brands, for example, they could be there. They could be on that shelf. Why not? And there will be importers in Canada that specialize in bringing in British products. Easy to find. Lastly, the importance of peer-to-peer networking. And this is a concept that's actually been developed to a very high level by the so-called bilateral chambers. Now, there aren't any bilateral chambers in the Southwest, but they're certainly strong, established in London. They have chapters in Birmingham. They have chapters in Scotland. These bilateral chambers, such as the British Icelandic, the Norwegian British, the Danish UK Association, they do a lot of really good work in encouraging peer-to-peer networking. And very often the networking events that they run, like Nordic Drinks, for example, every last Thursday of the month, is not only is it free, but it's actually open to non-members. And this is a great way to supplement any market research, any desk research that you do by actually having conversations with people like Jesse over a drink in pleasant surroundings, and just ask those questions from people who know, people who work in those target markets. So just a few points. It's a little bit of a rag bag of points, but hopefully it will be useful for some people.
Can I just pick up on that a little bit further? As you say, you've got the the UK shelf space in a Canadian supermarket, but we could also actually have a Cotswold shelf sitting on the web,
Yes.
or a UK sitting on the web that people can get to. And one of the things that we're trying to develop at the moment in Cotswold Taste is a sort of a database of local suppliers, including our own members, and almost get to a point where it's a potential could go to the website and say, well, what is being produced in this area around the food things that are there, and if you then start to promote that more broadly and to buyers elsewhere, then there could be a way in which you get an interesting product. Then there might be an opportunity to start to aggregate it. So I think we're only just dipping our toe in and thinking about the possibility. But the first thing we need to know is who's out there and what they're producing.
That's right.
Interesting, Roger, if I might just pick up on what Richard was saying and following on from Mark as well. I'm sitting on a working group that's looking at a Made in Gloucestershire campaign, which will incorporate quite a lot of what Richard was saying about what Cotswold's Taste are doing, and then use that as a brand that would then go online, and then people could export that abroad. Because the one thing that I always tell anybody that's thinking of exporting is that in a large parts of the world, despite all the politics and certain aspects of the history, the British flag still means something. It tends to mean quality. And if you put that on, if you put that Union Jack on something and you've got the right provenance for it, then that will attract a certain customer. So, and hopefully that will be the same with the Cotswold brand, with the Gloucestershire brand, with the Bristol brand, whatever. It's about, using what you've got locally, and then that could go anywhere in the world.
I guess the trick is, though, Sam, is that each of us doing these initiatives, we've got to talk together and make sure that we find a way in which it can be sort of cohesive and supportive of each other, but allowing people to see the different elements. So, it is important that we know what's going on with everyone else and we make it work together, isn't it? Because that way, we're going to be stronger together.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Absolutely.
I was going to pick up on that. Listening to the debate, I don't think we just can't survive without a collaborative approach to this. it's interesting when we were talking about the exports and we talked about products. I do think that there is an angle about exporting services and creative problem solving. So the peer-to-peer angle that we heard about a moment ago, that kind of resonates because the way that we're working at the moment overseas, so we have projects, as you know, Central Asia, but also South Africa at the moment. The partnership working is global. So, you know, there are those of us sitting here in the UK that are mentoring logistics startup businesses in South Africa. And that's really stretching sort of the envelope around communication. So I wonder whether there is also a talent export, Sam, that we've got here within the Southwest as well, which is around the service sector and the new ways of problem solving. If we go back to the debate we had around consolidation, you know, and can we fill a shipping container and who's going to do that? Actually trying to export some of those sort of, you know, ways of getting around things, new ways of looking at things. I think there could be an equal attention on that, not just a physical food stuff or something. So therefore, I think that there's something around that peer-to-peer networking. I was just thinking, Sam, when you said earlier about the FSB services that you'd put on with Brexit, and you know, you're kind of saying about the turn-up rates and things. I think there's something to be said for more intensive collaboration between training organizations. So for example, FSB, ourselves, to actually get people knowing about those products and actually trying to sell those more creatively, even in our local region. So I think collaboration for me and shared risk is something that we've got to look at. We concluded yesterday on the carbon discussion that none of us can do it on our own. And as soon as we look at the ripple effect of our supply chains, we cannot do this in isolation. So therefore, the challenges we're looking at here, almost you have to put down your own commercial interest for a little bit, and you have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think it's very true, John. I think what we're seeing from the panel here is an opportunity for us to think on a much broader basis and bring a lot of the knowledge that we have together from Sam and from Richard and from Mark into some form of collaborative activity to try and see if we can kickstart the export thinking in the West Country, and as we said, demystify the international trade event. I don't know what you think about that, Sam.
Yeah, I think it all makes perfect sense. In fact, I know that towards the end of the session, you were hoping to give tips about exporting, and John just used the phrase I had written down earlier, don't try to do it alone. And maybe that's as much for a business starting to export as organisations trying to encourage people to export.
That's right.
So I think you know, John's hit the nail on the head there.
Yep, I think you're right. Yes, I think the tips I've got down here, I think basically we've answered that from what Mark has said, but are there any more tips that we'd like to bring about? I mean, one of the biggest tips so far is we need to collaborate. Jesse, have you got any more tips you want to consider?
Nothing in particular. I'll just say that the collaboration part from sustainability is a really, really big, something we're really big on, and going in and saying, well, it's very likely that if I as a business have a problem, well, my competitors are likely to have the same problem, right? So could we actually get together to find solutions and redefine, I almost see like, I'm very visual, see like a football pitch and say we're redefining the playing field for what we can do as businesses. And this is obviously within sustainability, but we do that by finding solutions. So I know it's not your industry, but the fashion industry does it a lot with their pollution problems, and saying what can we do to clean water, for instance. It could happen in the coffee industry as well. How do we clean the water? Right, we have the solution and now we go away and we compete. I think that's brilliant.
Hayden, what sort of tips would you give for Africa in terms of how to develop the opportunities there?
Well, I'll just give you a little example. I'm a wool producer, and I know where you guys are, there's tons of sheep, but you don't necessarily create good soup. But anyway, the story goes, I joined the Responsible Wool Standard, and all it's a little bit of a headache, yes, but it is like what we keep coming to, and what Jesse keeps mentioning. It's part of the sustainability and integrity standardization of everything. It's one thing joining and getting a competitive advantage within an established market, absolutely. But there's another thing with all this paperwork. It's a lot of drain on time proving that you are having the sustainability and integrity ethics, or that your management style, you can prove that you're actually achieving it. So there is a technical component that has to be there. We need to have the software tools that can make sure that we've got the quality and integrity and sustainability aspects available, readily available, to save us time, but also just to make sure that we are always compliant. So there is more paperwork, but we can't just keep doing it on paper. We have to move into the technical cloud-based platform where all this information is readily available.
If I may say, it reminds me of the situation when ISO 9000 came out. Many companies started looking at the difficulty of introducing that standard and the paperwork and the trails of compliance that were necessary. And you've seen a multitude of software and technical issues come out to support that. What technical issues do we have on the international trade side that we could, there's one of them, Hayden, that you brought out. What other technical support might we consider? Have you got any thoughts on that, Jesse?
So we partner up with a tech company in terms of calculating baselines for companies. It's always the first thing we do. We go in and we look at our customers, and then we say, where are you? What industry are you in? What are your competitors doing? And what are the expectations in the market that you are either in or looking to move into? And then we take all inputs and we use different tools to say, this is your carbon baseline. And we can then identify where the hotspots are within that, right? And go in and help them progress. So I think everything has to be data driven. I can't remember who made the point about that, but you can't just make up what it is that you do. You really have to put the proof in the pudding and then work from that. And it is a lot of paperwork. And also say there's a point around uniformity here and compliance, because there's a lot of businesses that do a little bit over the sour coffee machine, and they come up with what they think are the best. And really it's cherry picking your courses instead of saying, where does it have the biggest impact? And then actually be willing to walk the path that and do that work. And I think that's really important. So commit to science-based targets, use GRI frameworks that are leaning on UN and stuff like that to actually prove that what you're doing is the right thing and not just the easiest path to success.
Mark, any comments from you on sort of the technologies we might be able to
apply?
apply?
I was just thinking about things that have been very helpful to us over the last couple of years, things that I wouldn't have thought of maybe 10 years ago. And it's actually on the financial side. So just the practicalities of handling international payments and managing the process with tech assistance. And there's some very innovative fintech companies around offering products for SMEs. So a couple of tips, and we're getting really good support, really good help from a currency broker in London. There are currency brokers everywhere, but some people new to export may not have thought of currency brokers. They'll be trying the bank. Banks are expensive, they're cumbersome, they're bureaucratic. With a friendly currency broker, you can ring the guy up, speak to him directly on the phone, and organize the transaction literally in minutes with a real person instead of trying to do it. That's one thing. And the other tools would be these e-invoicing tools, which you can you can download, and again, which are suited for international sales. So look at those financial services, tech services that are available, and make use of them.
Can I just add, from a technology point of view, if we actually look at, I'm sort of looking at a slightly different perspective, if we actually look at organised crime in Europe, food fraud is the third largest area of organised crime activity in Europe, according to Europol. And there's a lot of, within the food industry, there's been a lot of work being done behind the scenes to try and look at ways to counter that. And one of the things that's come out of that is the sort of increasing sophistication of blockchain technology, so that you're actually trapping so much information with your commodities that are being moved, including the immediate environment it lives into, who's involved with it, and it's all about being able to travel that information. I think the ability of data to travel with the commodity has got significant benefits, and I've some people I used to work with from an international certification point of view, they're setting up a new business where they're actually looking at going beyond that sort of standards and certification and blockchains into other ways of looking at integrity. And this includes things like people being able to evaluate food businesses virtually. So, you've got your food manager going around a plant with his Google specs on, and there's someone sitting at the computer like we are, and we're having a conversation no matter where we are in the world. And therefore, I think that sort of expertise to be able to ask questions about the integrity of a supply chain, and that data being able to travel and be available, is going to help tremendously, and it will obviously help with the logistics side of it. I think the other point, just really picking up on what Jesse was saying, that I used to say to my students for many years that good environmental management is good business management, because what you're doing is you're making sure that all of those expensive inputs are going to be valuable outputs and not expensive waste to deal with. But sustainability also embraces the social dimension, and that's always been the more difficult one to do. And I think the way in which you do it is, as we've mentioned earlier, it's having stories behind your products about your employees, your suppliers, what you're doing with the community. And all of those, it doesn't need Unilever to do that only. A small business can do that as well as part of their story. So a bit of a rambly thing, but there's 2 points there. One is the technology. The other is that good sustainability is good business sense if you do it right.
Absolutely. Sam, did you want to make a point?
I was just agreeing with a lot of what I said, but I think what something Mark said struck me, that he was talking about crypto brokers, currency brokers rather, currency brokers, yeah. But again, I mean, I wasn't aware of that. No, not crypto brokers. So how do small businesses find out this stuff? And I think this all comes back to what we're saying about how getting the message out, telling them what support's available, but then hints and tips that are invaluable. And that's why we need peers. We need people who walk that walk to say, okay, I know where you are. I've been where you are. This is what I did. These are the mistakes I made. I think I'd always say that to businesses. Be realistic. Your first venture into exporting may not be a success, but ask yourself, was your first venture into selling locally a success? Not always. And just be realistic about what you can achieve. But bear in mind, there's people who already walk that walk. So, we've all got a bit of responsibility really to point people in the right direction of support, and then just try and find examples of businesses that are like them that could help them.
Yeah, in a similar way to Mark's comment on the financial side, when you look at freight forwarders, it's amazing how in the work we've done with clients, how freight forwarders, they don't understand what they do and the necessity and the simplicity that they offer to exporting. So there is a checklist of all the information that's necessary, and I think maybe we can, if we can cooperate together as we've indicated here, I think we've got a lot of knowledge and talent that we could bring to the industry to assist in helping the SMEs to really focus on those opportunities with knowledge.
But how do you set up that network? How do you bring these organisations together to I've put
a lot of notes here, and I should be talking to all of you very shortly. Don't worry.
I mean, one of the things that when we were trying to look at our own cooperative website, we asked members, what they needed. And one of the things they really said they needed more than anything was a forum where they could talk to each other. So if that's happening within the Cotswolds, I think it can go wider within the different sectors of the industry. Where people have this, and a key element of that forum would be the sorts of conversation we're having and the tips that people can pick up from it.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting. We're kind of reinventing the wheel here. I mean, I've been in export for not quite as long as you, Roger, but certainly a long time. And I remember.
Forget degree here.
But I remember. Do you remember the export clubs? I mean, export clubs. 20 years ago, there were many export clubs all over the country. I'm not sure how many of those are still going, but they were clubs, you know, for mutual benefit. And they were very helpful at this kind of sharing of knowledge and experience. So maybe we need another export club.
maybe. Oops. Sorry, Hayden.
Yes, there's a theme that's been running through this one, which I really like, is that demystify. I mean, obviously, I'm feeling a lot better about exporting some of my products after this discussion, but that element that came up, like, to imagine you're a small SME, you have to be ISO 9000 compliant, you have to be ISO 45001 compliant, now you've got the GDPR, and you've just overwhelmed with all these. Now you've got the good business journey, and you've got the sustainability and integrity. I'm getting overwhelmed just talking about it, you know, and you know, so it's up to us and people like Jesse's company and wherever I can assist to demystify. It's actually all the same processes, you know, and it is good business. You know, if you can prove that, it'll give you an advantage. You know,
Absolutely.
Trying it, yeah. And compliance is terrible, but if you do it properly, it'll demystify it, and people feel a lot will risk going for those markets. I know I am.
Yeah, well, taking the point that Mark said about going back in history, and I mentioned ISO 9000, I remember when the BS standard came out, all companies, particularly SMEs, said, this is just going to cost us money. The reality is, of course, if you do it right, the quality of the product and the process and the business improves and you make money out of it. And I think the compliance we're talking about in international trade is the same thing. It really is bringing about the knowledge we have in a way that we can share and guide SMEs. So I think we've covered a significant amount of ground, and hopefully we can demystify international trade by some further activity between us. It's now just gone 11 o'clock, so I have to bring the session to a close, and thank you all for very much participating. It's been a very lively discussion yet again, and hopefully we'll get some questions this afternoon. If not, I have sent a few questions across to you already to plant them, and I'm sure we're going to come back into demystifying the situation again. So thank you again, and thank you everyone for participating, and it's very much appreciated.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.